Well, one of the key features of the Walther Collection is a focus on photography, particularly portraiture and self-representation. So he's looked very closely at that in the work of contemporary photographers, dealing with issues of identity, but he's also paid close attention to historical patterns of representation and studio practices. So in particular, he is focused on the work of great African master studio photographers like Seydou Keita, Malik Sidibé, and Samuel Fosso. But he's also looked at the lesser-known studios, what we might call vernacular photography, which I think of as kind of people's representation. There's an interesting thing that has happened in the intersection of the contemporary reception or contemporary artists working with these kinds of vernacular images or practices and the historical practitioners. And a good example is Seydou Keita, whose works were rediscovered, much like those of the Kitty Studio, and recuperated and recontextualized into the contemporary art world while he was still living, and he began to make work in a slightly different way. But what's exciting about the early work especially was the way that people who came to his studio for portraits performed before the camera, often acting out scenes of liberatory or ecstatic or joyful behavior that wasn't necessarily possible in another venue in their life. So we often see people with radios or even telephones dancing in those scenes. In many cases, contemporary artists have engaged with those types of photographs or the remnants of those type of photographs. So for instance, in the example of Kay Hassan, the artist has taken these leftover remnants of official photographs, really the negatives produced from a Polaroid camera, to create a kind of collage in reverse, a negative representation of identity of multiple individuals and characters. Or in the case of Martina Bacigalupo, she's taken the leftover remnants of a studio photograph taken for identity purposes where the main portrait, the face, has been cut out of these photographs and the leftover discarded, which she salvaged and actually produces a very interesting profile of identity through clothing, posture, and so forth. So I've been engaged in a long-term study of vernacular photography, mostly in the United States, but it intersects in an interesting way with the Walther Collection focus on Africa, in that he has looked so closely at these African studios and their practices over several generations. A recent addition to the collection is a group of photographs by S.J. Moodley from his studio called the Kitty Studio, which was a very interesting and intense political hub in the small town of Pietermaritzburg, which is in northeastern South Africa. And Moodley was an Indian immigrant and very politicized during the apartheid era. And he opened his studio to all manner of people, white or colored or Indian. So we see a broad range of people and manners of dress and manners of self-presentation in these photographs.